Where is all this money, Jim? Let us know so we can go and get some and
it's everywhere.
Take care of ourselves.
It's everywhere, Bonnie. People say, you know, how could there be a crisis? The Fed printed $4 trillion. But the problem is the world created $70 trillion of debt on top of the $4 trillion of money printing. So we're actually more leveraged than ever. The banks in 2008 were too big to fail. The biggest banks are bigger. They have a larger percentage of the total banking assets. The derivatives books are much bigger. So everything that was unstable in 2008 is worse today. You know these crises happen every 7, 8 years. It doesn't mean it's going to happen tomorrow, but 1994, 1998, 2008, it's been 8 years since the last one almost, and it won't be very long before the next one. But the next one's going to be different, because the last two times, 98 and 2008, when everyone wanted their money back, they printed the money. The next time, they're not going to print the money because they're tapped out. They're going to lock down the system. So money market funds will suspend redemptions. Bank ATMs can be reprogrammed to give you $300 a day for gas and groceries. They can selectively shut the banks. And we're seeing it. We saw it in Greece. We saw it in Cyprus. We're seeing it today in India. The banks are closing. They're out of cash. So this is the plan. It actually comes out of the G20 Brisbane Summit, November 2014. That was the bail-in lockdown plan.
Ray Dalio of Bridgewater, writing on LinkedIn just a few minutes ago, reflecting on the election we had last week, says there's a good chance there were one of those major reversals that last a decade, and he brings up 1970-71, 1960s period of non-inflationary growth, and the 1980s shift to disinflationary strong growth. Do those analogs make sense to you? Do you agree with Ray here that we're at a pivotal point? I
definitely think we're at a pivotal point. See, the Trump economic team, you look who's around them, you know, it's David Malpass, Steve Moore, Larry Kudlow, Art Laffer. Great guys. This is the Reagan team. And,
well, yeah.
And they're going to run the Reagan playbook, but there's a big difference. When Ronald Reagan ran the Reagan playbook, when he was sworn in January 1980, interest rates were 20%, inflation was 13%, and debt to GDP was 35%. So interest rates had nowhere to go but down. The bond market had nowhere to go but up. Stocks and bonds rose together. Reagan piled on debt, but starting from a very low level. So Reagan had all these tailwinds. Now, Trump's going to try to run the same playbook with nothing but headwinds. Debt to GDP is 100%. Interest rates have nowhere to go but up. Inflation has nowhere to go but up. So this is like Reagan ran a playbook against the high school football team. Trump's going to run the same playbook against the New England Patriots. So you get a very different result.
Well, and in fact, I just want to bring up the DXY because you will be able to see in the chart where the Reagan dollar was at the time. It was very strong,
right.
Dollar index, as soon as it comes up. We can see there, you see the 1988 to 84 period roughly, you see a very strong dollar. Now, the dollar index is strengthening again, but isn't that the one trump card that, yeah, what you say, I mean, its potential to happen is there,
right.
But because of the strong dollar, it's unlikely. And you also suggest that there's a conspiracy there.
Well, it's not a conspiracy so much. What I call the global elites, and it's not like some deep, dark conspiracy like they're all wearing hoods, you know, around a table. We know who they are. It's Christine Lagarde, it's Mario Draghi, it's Larry Summers, it's professors, central bankers, you know, thought leaders, etc. It's not that they're in a conspiracy, but they're like-minded. They all went to the same schools. They actually, some of them are each other's professors. Stan Fisher was PhD, a thesis advisor to a lot of the central bankers around the world. So they all think alike. So there's a little bit of groupthink going on. This is really the globalized elite. But the problem is you can have the same policies, but if the initial conditions are different, you will get very different results. That's what complexity theory teaches. So again, strong dollar during the Reagan years, that was deflationary. Strong dollar is always deflationary. But when inflation is starting out at 15%, you want deflation or disinflation. With Trump, with inflation starting out about 1.6%, a strong dollar could throw you into zero, even outright deflation, as opposed to disinflation. So, again, same playbook, different initial conditions, you'll get very different results, potentially disastrous results. The other point I'm making, David and Ivani, is that the systemic risk doesn't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. It's like when an avalanche happens and it kills a skier, it doesn't care if the skier is a liberal or a conservative. There are bigger forces at play than the partisanship and the policies that they choose. And these cannot be stopped except by extreme measures, and that's why I'm talking about locking down the system. This is all, I think it's all documented in the book. For example, the money market funds. In 2008, they could not suspend redemptions. They had to give you the money back, and they couldn't break the buck. Both of those laws have been changed very recently. Now they can break the buck. So you put $1 in. Used to get $1 out, you know, plus interest might be low. Now they can give you 95 cents or 94 cents, depending on the market. But worse yet, they can suspend redemptions.
But isn't that a good thing? I mean, market to market is supposed
to
be a good thing, right?
It's a good thing, Bonnie, unless you want your money. This is my point. From a policy point of view, this is called, you know, macroprudential regulation. In 1933, FDR shut the banks. In 1914, the New York Stock Exchange was closed for 5 months. We've seen all this before. My point is, when they get desperate, they're going to lock down the system. Does it save the world? Might buy a little time, but what if you want your money back?